From MTN News, you're watching Montana This Morning.
Well, like many local schools, Montfortin is struggling to keep up with staffers out due to COVID-19 exposure, but that school is handling the problem a little differently. We'll show you a unique cooperative effort to keep classes going.
And most of us are likely to miss the big Thanksgiving gathering of friends and family, but for some, the empty seats at the table are permanent. Coming up, how those who have lost loved ones to the pandemic are coping this holiday season.
Well, you're watching Montana This Morning. It is Monday. It's about 6:30 here. Holly Brantley, Chet Lehman, Matt Elwell, and we've been talking about how these numbers, we usually say they're struggling, but I'm thinking this is the calm before the next snowstorm. I could feel it.
Yeah, you can probably feel some snow in the
Maybe
air.
not this week, but soon.
Wow, maybe she's pining for my job.
There you go, could be.
It is chilly and it is pretty calm for the most part. 11 below in West Yellowstone. Temperatures this morning definitely warrant coat and gloves and hats, especially for the kids that are heading out early. Mainly cloudy conditions. We're not expecting any snow today, at least nothing that's going to be all-encompassing. A little later this week, though, Holly, you may want to make sure you have that little brush for your car. We do have some snow before Thanksgiving. Yeah, that thing.
Okay.
We'll talk more about what you can expect as we head into Thanksgiving in just a few minutes.
Thank you, Matt. It is now 6:31. Quarantines and COVID contacts make it more difficult for Montana to staff schools, in some cases forcing them to take a step back to remote learning.
I learned some parents are stepping in to keep students in school.
How many would I have in one line?
Masked students learn math inside the walls of Montfortin School. Here, in-person learning continues in spite of the coronavirus thanks to a dedicated and determined staff and the help of parents who also have a passion for learning.
I am really excited to be able to support the teachers.
Sarah Baumgartner is a mother of 2 Montfortin students, answering the call to step in as a substitute teacher, something she never thought she'd do.
I was very nervous going into it, but I will tell you, these teachers are rock stars and they had everything set up and ready to go.
See, the need for subs stems beyond whether or not someone tests positive for COVID-19. Coming in contact or being otherwise exposed calls for quarantine, a domino effect that leads to short staffing and added stress for staff. In fact, both Longfellow and Meadowlark schools made the switch back to remote learning because of a shortage of substitute teachers.
We really need to be able to come together and as a community support each other so that teachers can have that time to be able to be home when they need to be home and to feel like the kids in the classroom are still being supported.
For the schools, parents as substitutes is a win on multiple levels. It eases the strain on staff, gets parents involved, and most importantly, ensures that kids keep on track when it comes to learning.
Yeah, we would not be able to stay open without having the community support and the substitute teaching support that we've had this year.
Superintendent Darren Strauss says that added help allows the teachers to take care of the needs of themselves and their own families while knowing their students are in good hands too, and they try to make the process easy.
And a lot of our teachers have actually, even if they're at home because they have lost childcare or if they're not feeling well or just are in a quarantine sort of situation, they'll actually stream into the classroom from home, and then that staff or the substitute employee, the guest teacher is in the classroom just kind of to help redirect questions and make sure that students are staying on task.
He says it's been a community effort to keep their school open. As for Sarah, she's calling on other moms, dads, and people who simply want to help to step up and do so. People who understand the future of the world is in our hands inside these classrooms.
Please sign up to sub because it was overwhelmingly a great experience.
Now, to be a sub, you must be 18 or older, pass a background check, and feel comfortable working around kids. If being a substitute isn't for you, schools tell us they are also in need of other support roles like kitchen staff and crosswalk volunteers.
Lots of opportunities to help.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Well, turning to the national scene now, another week is kicking off in Washington with no meetings between President Trump and President-elect Biden scheduled.
So what is not happening that usually happens during a presidential transition? Our Joe St. George is in Washington, says it's more than what you've probably heard so far.
We are 59 days away from Inauguration Day here in Washington, D.C., and we know a turkey will be pardoned at the White House this week, but we do not expect a concession. So what is not happening that usually happens during a presidential transition?
The American people have spoken, and they have spoken clearly.
This election is over, but our principles endure.
I congratulated Donald Trump and offered to work with him.
Well, for one, there has been no obvious speech asking for unity, nor has there been any traditional Oval Office meeting like the one President Obama and President Trump had in 2016. At the time, the nation was divided, and this was seen as a unifying moment. Beyond that, this non-traditional transition is already creating obstacles for President-elect Biden. For example, the General Services Administration may sound like an obscure government agency, but it is responsible for allowing the transition to start. Because it hasn't signed off on it yet, the president-elect has no access to taxpayer funds for travel or office space. But more importantly, the president-elect is not allowed until the transition starts to interact with current federal workers or members of the executive branch in the national security sector or the health sector. For example, the president-elect can't pick up the phone and call the Department of Health and Human Services and talk about vaccine developments or non-public pandemic-related information. He isn't allowed to receive national security briefings or updates from the FBI either. The last time the federal government delayed the transition was back in 2000 because of the Florida recount.
Selective hand recounts.
In the entire state of Florida.
And when September 11th happened, less than a year later, the 9/11 Commission report placed blame on the delayed transition, arguing it hurt President Bush's ability to get his national security team on the job in a timely manner. This lack of transition has real implications for President-elect Biden beyond a speech or a photograph. He'll be playing catch-up when he takes office January 20th. In Washington, I'm Joe St. George.
Well, Thanksgiving is coming up this week, and while it usually is filled with happiness, family, and food, this year's holiday season also means more than 600 Montana families are missing and mourning the loss of a loved one due to COVID-19.
Now, grief can be a helpless feeling, but one lame deer man is taking the tragedy of his father's death from COVID-19 to help others.
As MTN's Victoria Hill reports, grief can be a helpless feeling, but one lame deer man is taking the tragedy of his father's death to help others.
My father, his name is Isidore Whitewolf. He was a vet. I was close to him. I didn't think nothing of it when he first told me. He said, "Son, if I get this COVID, I'm not going to make it." And I thought, oh, he's tough. He'd been through a couple of heart stent surgeries and he gets through with diabetes.
But Isidore would be right. A positive test on August 21st.
I remember him telling me that he was scared when he did get it.
He took his last breath 22 days later on September 11th. His family left to mourn.
We all felt the grief and the shock of, we didn't see any of this coming to us.
And they weren't alone.
There was a lot of loss. At the time that I was at the hospital, there was a lot of people from my home and my town that passed away at the same time.
Goldstein and his family live in Lame Deer on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. His father's battle would be one of more than 30 lost on the reservation since the pandemic began.
And I was just feeling a lot of grief. And I didn't have a support group.
He turned to the internet, but a search didn't turn up any groups focused on lives lost to COVID-19.
So from there, I just thought, if it's either a couple of choices. Either I can wait around and see if someone does bring one up or does start something that would help us in our local areas, or I can start with myself.
And that's how the loss of loved ones to COVID-19 support group was born. Hosted every other Tuesday, Goldstein held his first Zoom session 2.5 weeks after his father's passing.
It was just about relating to each other, and not surprisingly, but we were all going through the same things with how to do this.
And to be in a group with people who are going through the same thing or have experienced the same thing is very helpful.
Terry Steinbrink is a hospice chaplain and bereavement specialist at Riverstone Health.
They realize I'm not crazy, there's nothing wrong with me, this is part of the natural grief process. So it's really helpful for them to be able to share with people that understand what they're going through.
While all deaths are tragic, a loved one passing away during the pandemic can add another layer of grief due to restrictions brought on by COVID-19.
A lot of them weren't able to see their loved ones at the end, which has added to the grief. They weren't able to have funerals or had really small funerals. And they just don't have quite as much support because people aren't dropping by to visit with them.
And as deaths across Montana add up, it means one less family member at the table during holiday gatherings, or for some, more.
Thanksgiving and Christmas are two of the harder holidays because they're thought of as family holidays. And so when you've lost, someone in your family, one woman I talked to a few weeks ago lost 4 family members. I mean, that's going to really impact their holidays.
Although they might not be present physically, the grieving process is softened when you allow them to be present spiritually.
It's important to come up with some way to remember their loved one. And we've had people do that in different ways. Some of them have maybe planted something, a plant that will bloom around the holidays. Some people light a candle in memory. If the whole family is comfortable, sometimes they'll share memories of the loved one. But I think it's really important for them to include some sort of ritual or way to remember their loved one through the holidays, because it's really hard to just try to pretend like everything's okay when it's not.
As he makes progress toward closure, Goldstein is willing to make himself vulnerable in hopes of helping others.
I would just suggest people to make sure they reach out and not go through whatever traumas that they're experiencing alone.
And this advice for anyone grieving this holiday season.
Be gentle with yourself. Do not have the same expectations of yourself through the holidays. Maybe simplify things. If you don't feel like going anywhere, that's okay. Just to really take care of yourself through the holidays.
In Billings, Victoria Hill, MTN News.
Running has played a part in Goldstein's journey to closure. On October 19th, he ran 26 miles, 1 mile for each member of the community that lost the battle against COVID-19.
Each find a way, and there is help out there. You are not alone.
Yes, take care of yourself throughout the holidays. That's what all health professionals I've spoken with as we've covered this topic have said.
Keep it simple.
Yep.
There you go.
Well, coming up on Montana This Morning, world leaders commit to making COVID-19 vaccines affordable for everyone on the planet. But there's something missing in the plan. We'll explain after the break.
But first, let's check in with Anthony Mason to see what's coming up at 7 o'clock on CBS This Morning.
Good morning. Ahead on CBS This Morning, the U.S. tops 12 million coronavirus cases. We'll talk with a public health expert about the timeline for a COVID vaccine and the effect of increased Thanksgiving travel despite officials' warnings. Also, because of the pandemic, Thanksgiving celebrations will be smaller, and so will turkeys. At the dinner table, we'll take you to a farm to show you the impact on turkey producers. And lending a helping hand, see how one community came to the aid of the country's oldest living World War II veteran to make sure he has a roof over his head. All that coming up when we see you at 7.